Conjoin palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. It's funny, usually if this happens, I determine exactly what I'm going to say or what I'm going to talk about this morning about 3 seconds ago. So I just kind of wait and see what pops into my head, and if it seems to make sense to talk about, then I talk about it. But anyone here for the first time? What brings you here? Those are here for the first time.
I wanted to experience something different and open my mind.
Yeah. Closed minds are a lot of fun, huh? We have to be careful with that because even when you explore something new, say like Buddhism or any spiritual religious practice, one can enter it with an open mind and then close their mind around that. So it's something to be kind of aware of. I call it Buddhist arrogance. Where we begin to do this stuff and then we're like, oh, that's the way. And then our mind closes and doesn't make room for anything else. So that's my warning. In the back, I saw another hand.
Yes, I was invited by my friend Jean, but I've always been interested in various spiritual practices.
Nice. Well, welcome. And the fact that you're friends with Jean, we will not hold against you, I promise.
You should.
I should. But what popped into my head was, as I was doing my offering, looking at the Buddha statue, the emaciated Buddha, which is, for me, what I connect with, I had this just flash in my head that I've been offering and staring at the eyes of that Buddha for, about 18 years now, every single day. And it's really cool because it's created opportunities to come back to, in that moment for me as a practitioner, when I make that offering, when I connect with that image, with that statue, with that Buddha, nothing else exists in my mind, meaning like it's just me and that moment, that kind of present moment connection with something. It doesn't matter if it's a Buddha statue, a flower, a rock, a candle, a shoe. So it's not about what it is. It's just about what resonates with you in that moment. In Buddhism, what we call making offerings, which is really an opportunity to kind of come out of yourself, meaning most of our lives are built around us. What we think is right, where we think we should go, who we think we should be with, what we think we should wear. Our entire life, for the most part, is built around our perception of feeding the self and the ego and the pride and all that stuff. And the practice of offerings is to take a moment to kind of come away from that, to move out of that world of just this self-serving me. And so in that moment, as I was doing that, it was almost as if like, anyone here seen the show Big Bang Theory, right? So at the beginning, the opening scene, I won't sing the song, I'll spare you the singing, but at the beginning of Big Bang Theory where the song is going, the whole universe, and you see like thousands of years flash on the screen, And I don't know how long, like 20 seconds or something like that. And so for me in that moment just now, I mean, it was only 18 years, but it was kind of similar to that, to where I was like 18 years of my existence with this statue, this image, this sense of self that I call me, and this thing I call an emaciated Buddha statue. It just all like there it was. It all flashed, everything else fell away, and then I'm just back to here. And what it meant for me is, and this all happened super fast, you know, it takes 10 times longer to explain it than it does to actually experience it. But what happens for me in that moment is it's a moment to recognize the journey that you, in this case me, is on, and the challenges and the difficulties and the conflicts that arise in one's life that will always be there. The mistake people often make with this practice is like, well, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to learn about Buddhism, then everything's going to be fine. No. Everything is never going to be fine. Everything is always going to be a different version of the absolute hectic, chaotic mess that you're living in right now. The question is, how can you relate to that chaotic mess? And if you can learn to relate to that chaotic mess in a calm, settled, peaceful manner, then what we refer to as a chaotic mess is just life. And your heart doesn't go crazy, your mind doesn't go crazy, your emotions don't go crazy. You just become an observer of your hectic, chaotic mess that you're living in. And you begin to, in practice and with practice, stop pointing the fingers and blaming and putting guilt and shame on yourself or others for all the challenges you're going through. And you recognize that, again, in this moment for 18 years, the only one that's been consistent with that is my mind. And where is my mind at through this practice? How am I responding to things through this practice? And as a reminder that that's never going to go away. For me, at least, as a practitioner. I'm never going to reach a moment where like, oh, that's it. I'm done. See y'all. No, I did that however many years ago, which is what led me to this madness. So it's a constant practice. It's a constant training of the mind. It's a constant training of the emotions. It's a constant day in and day out surrendering, the practice of surrendering the self and the ego to this present moment and learning to be with that. So to those joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free as you are to say hello. We'll start with the meditation practice for those who might be sitting for the first time or sitting with me for the first time. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing is going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice of learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Same thing in a bench or chair, however you're seated, if comfortable. Relaxing the shoulders, hands around the knees or lap. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. You're not going to shut your mind off. You're not going to go blank. You're not going to think nothing. Your mind will race. I'll say things periodically to bring you back to present moment or wake you up because you've fallen asleep. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought, returning attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, mind, learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move, and most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. Means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in, where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything outside of us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world outside of us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. And it requires drastically changing pretty much most, if not all, of the way you've done things for most, if not all, of your life. And that can be a little scary. Because it requires giving up much of what many of us hold on to with some illusion that we actually have of control. When we stop trying to control people and places and things, we begin to experience life. Not manipulate it, but experience it. These are two different things. So much of our life is trying to control outcomes. For me, Buddhist practice was the most beautiful thing because I finally found something that you couldn't win. There's no winning in Buddhism. It's not a game. It's not something you have to conquer. It's just an experience of each moment as it arises. And for someone like me growing up who always had to win everything I did, be the best at everything I did, it was nice to meet something where that construct completely vanished. There is no winning. Now I spent 2 years resisting that and trying to figure out how to win anyways. And then I eventually realized that, yeah, there really is nothing to win. And for me as a practice, so much of my life was always just the rush, the chasing, the what's next, regardless of what aspect of my life it was. It was always about more and next and better, and accomplish and achieve and gain and win. And all of that feeds our sense of self and our ego and our pride and our identity that we built that we think is so important. And then for me at least, I don't want to call it a mistake, but I would say the not correct view of practice, you look at right view, the Eightfold Path, that's the first step. The view that I had was not correct in that I was taking the same mindset I had of always chasing, always trying to win, always trying to be the best, and I brought that into Buddhist practice. And I spent the first couple of years in Buddhist practice trying to be the best Buddhist I could be, and trying to accomplish and achieve and win and gain. Before I realized that I was taking the same madness I took into every other area of my life into Buddhist practice, which was the dumbest thing in the world. Learning to just sit and be with life as it arises is so contrary to what most of us know how to do. Yet, specifically, especially in Zen practice, that's exactly what it is. It is sitting with life as it arises, beyond judgment, beyond critique, beyond attachments, and knowing that each moment, each breath is a tremendous gift to have, and one day we will have no more. That became true practice. of recognizing in each moment, what can I do with that moment that is free from greed, anger, and ignorance? And what can I do in that moment, with that moment, that is filled with generosity, compassion, and wisdom? Still not sure how to do the wisdom part, but the other two I think I've done okay with. And that was it. Nothing to chase. So, with spiritual practice, meditation, Buddhism, whatever your spiritual life is like, could be church on Sunday, which a lot of people here still go to church. Whatever your experience is, stop chasing. And just start being. It's a big difference. And Buddhism, like everything else, has all the traps. There's a great book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And it's a great teaching on how we can get so wrapped up within Buddhist practice to think that there's something that we're supposed to gain or get. And it's cutting through all of that. Nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Just sitting and breathing. And for many, that's not enough. And the Buddha teaches very clearly that because this is not enough, we suffer. Most are not okay with the simple fact that you're alive and you're breathing. That's not enough for most people. Because we're not taught that that's enough. Until you spend much of your life miserable and depressed and angry and sad, end up here and look at Buddhist teachings that are trying to tell you you're enough just as you are. But that is so different from everything you've been told your whole life. Thus, you have to fight against the box that you created in your head that tells you just being is enough. Or it tells you just being is not enough. And so the practice of just being enough is okay. So with that, I'll pause. Always really prefer just responding to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And to those who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free to say hello. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions. Virtual folks, if you put anything in the chat box there as a question, I'll do my best to respond as well. So we'll open up to questions. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much. I never thought I could sit for 20 minutes quiet and focusing on my breathing. So that was amazing. What I noticed when I was quiet is my mind's eye. I was kind of like walking through the forest, kind of part of this light, and every time I tried to dissipate that thought, it was still present. Do I sound crazy?
Oh. If you told me that you sat there perfectly still with no thoughts for 20 minutes, then I would think you were crazy and a liar. So what you just shared is perfect. Yeah.
It was really an experience.
Yeah, I think for those virtually didn't hear, I try to paraphrase what you asked, what you shared, but your first comment was, thank you for the meditation. You didn't think it was possible for you to sit still and, focus on breath for 20 minutes. And that during your meditation practice, your kind of mind's eye was just walking through a forest and seeing light. And every time you try to go away from that, you come back to that. And you asked if you were crazy. And I already responded, so you all heard the response. But I think to comment a little more on that, especially with meditation practice, especially if it's by newer, meaning if you've been at this for like 10 years, that's new. If it's not a daily practice, it's new. If it's something you do once a week, it's new. And ultimately, just if we begin to see that every moment of our lives, including meditation, is always new. Again, taking away that idea of like, oh, I've done this for 6 months, where's my certificate? Now I'm advanced. It's always new. And I think with meditation practice, not to be wrapped up in the importance of necessarily what occurred or what we thought or what we saw, or, but just to be aware of it. People often say, like, well, this happened, this wasn't your question, but often people will ask, this happened during meditation, what does it mean? As if we're, reading some book that's supposed to tell us what our thoughts mean. It just means you have thoughts and you're human and you're alive. That's what it means. If you had no thoughts during meditation, you're probably not breathing. And then, that's a lot of paperwork, and we'd have all that. So I'm glad you had thoughts. It would have ruined the rest of our morning. What else? Questions?
So sometimes I use a mantra to quiet my other thoughts.
Yeah.
Is that good, bad?
Yeah, question is sometimes you use mantras to quiet your other thoughts. Mantras are great. They're a beautiful practice, very common in various schools of Buddhism. Whatever the mantra is, one common one kind of coming out of Tibetan Buddhism, Om Mani Padme Hum, which is the great compassion mantra. The thing about mantras is they give you something to focus on, and that's a beautiful practice. My master always said you could focus, recite, meaning use a mantra of the Buddha's name, or you could use the mantra of Coca-Cola, right? What he wanted me to understand was it wasn't so much what the mantra was that was important. Some will believe otherwise, but this was his teaching. It wasn't so much what the mantra was important, except for the fact that that mantra kept us from focusing on all the other random things that are going. So it was helping to train our mind to be present. So mantras are beautiful practices. For those who use mantras in practice and or guided meditations, visualizations, things like that, I will always suggest balancing mantra practice, guided meditation practice with some silent meditation practice. The thing about mantras is it's a beautiful tool, but what happens if you don't have the mantra, right? It's kind of like music. We listen to music, we're lost in thought. Often people will say, can I listen to music during meditation? There's nothing wrong with music. There's nothing wrong with mantras. There's nothing wrong with guided meditations. But when silence hits, like absolute silence, what are we stuck with? Our thoughts and ourselves. And what are we often trying to run away from? Our thoughts and ourselves. Which is why I always suggest balance, silence sometimes. I've worked for 15 years with veteran population, active military, PTSD, TBI, traumatic brain injuries. And for anyone who's gone through trauma of any degree, silence can be torture. Absolutely 100% torture. And so when I say I always recommend balancing it with silence, there's an asterisk there that says just be careful with that. If 5 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then don't do 5 minutes, try 1 minute. If 1 minute of silence is torture, don't do 1 minute, try 30 seconds. If that's torture, try 1 or 2 or 3 breaths. So ultimately, I'm very biased as a Zen practitioner in trying to figure out how do we learn to just sit with this madness. But mantras are a beautiful practice. Yeah. There's a comment here about a lavalier mic. We will look into that. Thank you, Neo. How about I just yell? Yeah.
This relates to the last topic. How about counting? Because when I went to my first introduction to Zen Buddhism, that Japanese tradition, they taught the newcomers to count till 10.
Yeah.
Start again. It's a similar thing like a mantra.
Yes. The question is around what about counting? At your first Zen experience, they taught you to count. Yes, in the Zen practice and monastery life, what we were taught and we were trained on was a counting mechanism as well, where you would close your eyes, to begin to train the mind, breath in, breath out, count 1. Breath in, breath out, count 2. We would repeat this to 10. If we lost focus at all, meaning if any other thought arose, you'd come back to the counting. But it would be 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 1. And then same thing would repeat, 1 to 10, but you would imagine the number being drawn. So breath in, breath out, you would see a 1. Breath in, breath out, you would see a 2. Breath in, breath out, you would see a 3. Not with the hand gesture, I'm just visualizing or expressing what I would see. And then you would see it being drawn, same thing, 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 1. And then you would see it being drawn in a color. 1 to 5, I would see red, 1, or 1 to 10, 2, red, 3, red, and same cycle. And then after that, then you would imagine it, 1 being drawn, red, and then it would expand and back. 2, red, expand, back. So all of these methods are great for training the mind. But I see meditation practice as not separate from everyday life. And so in meditation, what we call seated or walking or however we're doing our meditation practice, it is a training, but ultimately we don't walk around in our day counting or reciting mantras. Often we use those tools, but what if we set the tools down? What are we left with? Yeah.
Question. So you were talking about balance and mantras and then having massage as well. This was the first time I've ever meditated where the first half I was doing zazen, the second half somebody popped and I slipped into Dharma. So I switched gears and approach, and I've never done that. I always try to maintain the same type of focus.
Sure.
Is there any benefit to doing that, or should one try and stick with one form throughout that whole meditation?
Yeah, so the question around, you started doing the Zazen practice, which is just focus on breath, and then somebody coughed and you switched to Tonglen practice. I don't care if you switch to standing on your head, right? I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong or good or bad with that. Some people will tell you ultimately find a practice that works for you and stick with it. But I think for the average person, meditation is such seated meditation, such a tiny piece of people's lives that however you're doing it is great. If you were doing this 8, 10, 12 hours a day, then my suggestion would be find that one practice, and work on that 8, 10, 12 hours a day. But most people are lucky if they can do it 8, 10, 12 minutes a day. So however you're doing it, that's fine. But I think even bigger picture, like you say you started in Zazen, and then you switched to Tonglen. That's only because you're putting some concept on starting and finishing. It's only because you're putting some concept on a cough versus silence. It's only because you're putting some concept on one meditation being different from another. Shatter those contracts and you just sat. Shatter sitting and you just were. So, yeah, it's great. What do we spend most of our lives doing? Thinking things are what? Right or wrong? And here we are, rightfully so, focused on, is what happened to me right or wrong? Is my meditation right or wrong? Is how I'm doing it right or wrong? Shatter that. What was the first thing I said to you when you raised, sorry, what's your name? Trudy, and you said you wanted to open your mind, and I said be careful of that because Buddhism, you can then close it. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, is we can then close our mind around meditation types, Buddhist types. Shatter that. Don't harm people. Stick with that, including yourself. What else? Questions? Yeah.
I'm almost afraid to ask, what is Tonglen?
Oh, no. Don't worry about it. Never be afraid to ask questions. I can't tell you not to be afraid. My suggestion is, You're going to be afraid whether I tell you to or not to, but very often with questions, almost always when somebody asks a question, I guarantee somebody else was thinking it. Right? Was anyone else in here thinking, what is Tonglen? Look at that. You got 12 other people who were afraid to ask, and you are now the brave one, putting all of them to shame, you know? So you are the winner. Do you want to share what Tonglen practice is?
Sure. So, Zazen is sitting in silence, focused on the breath. Tonglen is focused on, it's almost like using your mind's eye to visualize pain and suffering in the world is like a smoke. You are, with every in-breath, breathing in the suffering of others. You can focus on a specific individual, on a group, whatever it is. And allowing the sense of your ego and your identity to clash with that smoke as you breathe it in, and then the two of them to dissolve. So you're dissolving the pain and suffering of someone else while dissipating your sense of ego and allowing everything to kind of merge together.
Way better than I would have said it. That's why I asked you. I'm not a Tonglen practitioner. I just would have said it's breathing in all the pain and suffering in the world and breathing out love and compassion. But your specifics on that were phenomenal. So, yeah, it's a beautiful practice. Again, very specific into Tibetan Buddhism. If you Google Tonglen, Tonglen, and Pema Chodron, she's a wonderful Buddhist teacher, Tonglen practitioner. You could YouTube it, you'll find it out there. It's great. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
You talk about the third noble truth. The first is obviously we suffer. Second is the cause of suffering. Third is the cessation of suffering. Is that possible?
You left out one very important noble truth. How many are there? Which I know you know. 4.
Yeah.
So the question is, can I talk about the third noble truth? The first is life is suffering. I'll expand on this a little bit. Second one, as you said, is the cause of suffering. The third, as you said, is the cessation of suffering. And you want to know if the cessation of suffering is possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not in order.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that's... I don't know how much order you need. I mean, again, I know I said shatter numbers and boxes and all that kind of stuff, but they help, right? So here's the interesting thing about the 4 Noble Truths, and I think I'll walk through them in a minute, but let me start by saying this. Very often we think about cause and effect. And the 4 Noble Truths, I think brilliantly so, are literally listed in number 1 is the effect. The second is the cause. The third is the effect. The fourth is the cause. So life is filled with dukkha. Doesn't mean all life sucks. It means we suffer a lot, discomfort, dissatisfaction, angst, pain, trauma, heavy, death, loss, as well as, our latte the wrong way, our sandwich isn't prepared properly, we don't like the way our hair looks, our shirt looks funny, a little bit of suffering that doesn't ruin your life. But we experience these things every single day. That is the effect. The cause, that's the first noble truth. The cause is the second one. Greed, anger, ignorance. The 3 poisons, as they're called. So we practice generosity, compassion, and wisdom to overcome greed, anger, and ignorance. So the cause of our suffering is craving, desire, attachment, greed, anger, ignorance. The effect of practicing generosity, compassion, wisdom, non-attachment, getting over sense of self, the effect of doing all of that is the first noble truth. The effect of the third noble truth, which is cessation of suffering, is caused by the fourth noble truth, which is working on correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Sorry, dude, you got 8 more things you got to do, right? And it's funny because even Thursday night I talked about this specifically, where I kind of went to the other way, and we often talk about in kind of these Buddhist circles like, practice compassion, practice loving kindness, read a Pema Chodron book about being all compassionate and being a beautiful person, right, inside and out in our actions. But what we often fail to look at is our anger. We just want to jump straight to, let's go practice compassion, which is how we overcome anger. But we have to look at the anger. Don't ignore the anger. We often look at, let's just practice generosity. we have to look at our greed. We often look at, let's just practice wisdom. But we have to look at our ignorance. So, if we want to end suffering, cessation of suffering, freedom from suffering, we must practice the Eightfold Path. And that starts with recognizing that our views are not right. Then we have to look at all of our thoughts. Views, thoughts, speech, action. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. This is literally number 2, 3, and 4 of the Eightfold Path. Starts there. From having proper views, right? Thoughts, speech, and action. This then plays into our livelihood, our effort. Last on the list is mindfulness and concentration. You know what most people come into Buddhism for? Meditation. And for Westerners, they don't even want to say that word. They just call it mindfulness because it makes them feel better, right? Do you practice meditation? No, I do mindfulness. We don't really give a shit what you call it, right? But for those who have some problem with the term meditation, welcome to America. It's like, no, I practice mindfulness, right? But you don't worry about that so much in this circle. But in a lot of Western culture, everybody's into mindfulness. Just don't call it meditation because that freaks them out, right? Again, we don't care what you call it. But the thing is, so many people come into this practice to meditate, which is important. But where is it on the Eightfold Path, which is required to end suffering? Where's meditation? Number 8. What do we think is most important? Meditation. It's not. What's more important? And the Eightfold Path is in order. Again, now we got 1 through 8, right? And I hate to talk about no constructs and no order and then suggest something that is in order. But it is in order. Because if all your thoughts are filled with greed, anger, and ignorance, and all your words are filled with greed, anger, and ignorance, and all your actions are filled with greed, and anger, and ignorance, what good does meditation do you? Now you're just a greedy, angry, ignorant a-hole who meditates. Right? So, coming back to your question about cessation of suffering, as I often say, as a practitioner, I've been at this a long time. I don't wake up thinking, when am I? And this was the nature of your question, right? And I've known you long enough to know. It's like, come on, I've been at this stuff for a few years on and off. How come I'm still suffering? What do you mean the Buddhist said cessation of suffering? Is that even possible? I don't think about when will my suffering end. Again, that's a goal. That's an expectation. That's something I have to win. Ending suffering sounds like winning. I don't wake up ever and think, will I end suffering today? For me as a practitioner, I think very genuinely and seriously, can I suffer less today than I did yesterday? And to even begin to suffer less today than I did yesterday, my thoughts, my words, and my actions, 2, 3, and 4 on the Eightfold Path, have to be kinder and gentler today than they were yesterday. So it is a constant. And for me, kind of to wrap up, or basically wrap up, coming back to me doing at the beginning where I said looking at the emaciated Buddha, that's what I'm talking about, is every single day recognizing where are your thoughts, where are your words, where are your actions, and are they kinder and gentler today than they were yesterday? That is the practice. I don't ever think, am I ending my suffering today? Is today the day? Because I already know the answer to that. The answer to that is absolutely not. No way. Because as soon as my mind, and I'm just going to close with confusing all of you, as soon as my mind would give rise to the idea that there is even suffering to end, I clearly am not going to get it. That's a lot what I go into on Sundays with the Heart Sutra stuff. But it's understanding that it is that concept of self and suffering that even allows this idea of ending of suffering to exist. Focus on intentions of your thoughts and your words and your actions. That is it. Spend every moment of your life focused on what are your thoughts, what are your words, and what are your actions. And drop the attachment or idea of suffering at all. That's literally the Heart Sutra. Right? Everything in Buddhism will tell you suffering, cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the path. You know what the Heart Sutra tells you? There is no suffering. There is no cause of suffering. There is no ending of suffering. And there is no path whatsoever. there is no wisdom or any attainment. With nothing to attain, bodhisattvas relying on perfect wisdom attain anuttara samyak sambodhi supreme, ultimate enlightenment. So I've just made it real simple for you all. You're done. You have nothing to attain. You don't ever need to come back. Go home, eat some cereal, watch cartoons, and you're good. Good? So I hope to never see you again. We'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Laura Walsh during her time of rebirth, and to Carla and Brenda and our entire family who suffers at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night, different practices going on from different Buddhist traditions. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do a food redistribution program. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks and you kind of lack gratitude for all you have, show up and feed some people sleeping on a sidewalk. It tends to put things into perspective a little bit. We have some new stuff, new classes, new schedule happening. Bob, who many of you have been sitting with for quite a while, on Wednesday nights, on and off. He's coming back again. Now he'll start this Wednesday night. So he'll be back on Wednesday. In a couple weeks, we're also going to kind of shift and start it'll be similar to Dharma Bum Basics, but it's going to have a focus on Pema Chodron's book. It's titled Becoming Bodhisattvas. So for all of you who want to become something better than what you are, and you already come to Thursday anyway, so you're good. But we're going to shift that focus a little bit. That'll be on Thursday nights. Then we also have a new Zen practice Wednesday nights happening downstairs. All that stuff's on the website or will be on the, above the shoe rack there with the flyers and stuff. So other than that, thanks for being here. If anybody wants to stay and help clean up, there's lists of stuff to do, so feel free. As I always say, we have no cleaning crew, we are it. Buddha for you is there if you need anything downstairs, and thank you all for being here.